Hey everybody, Jeff Tidwell here with another one of my tweet videos for you today. It is Saturday, December 14th, 2019, and we are diving back into the past, going back to March 2019 to look at some tweets, analyze them, break them down, deconstruct them, hey, get a little bit postmodern if you will. I think if you've seen the channel before, you know what to expect. As always, I can be found at Real Jeff Tidwell on Twitter. I'm also on Gab, Minds, Telegram, Parler, and Instagram. If you're not watching this video on BitChute, you're watching it on YouTube. Thank you very much for watching, and if you do enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. Hit the little bell below for notifications, and leave me a comment below with your thoughts and observations, accolades and criticisms. Trolling welcome. I take it all, and I do appreciate that. And of course, if you find my cadence to be a little bit on the slow side, you can hit the 2x speed button and get all of the information in half of the time. Time, of course, is the currency. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is double bang for your buck. So definitely check that out. So without further ado, let's get into some tweet action today. And actually today I'm going to start with a story that my friend Jim sent me regarding censorship. And this was on Twitter. So this is a story. I won't go into too much detail or pass judgment. That's up to you in the comments section below, but I will talk a little bit about this just for a moment and explain what happened. So this is a story in 3 parts. The first tweet here that's got this all started was from the 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, talking about Greta Thunberg, the climate activist. Donald Trump says, "So ridiculous. Greta must work on her anger management problem, then go to a good old-fashioned movie with a friend. Chill, Greta, chill." Okay, so that was a popular trending tweet about 2 days ago. And in response to that, famed comedian Patton Oswalt went ahead and posted a response. He retweeted the president and said the following: "The president is a stupid asshole, and if you voted for him, you're a stupid asshole, and if you still support him, you're a stupid asshole. Oh no, this tweet is going to make all the stupid assholes not like me. Wah! Wah!" Okay, so my friend Jim decided to respond to Patton Oswalt. Of course, Twitter is considered to be a free speech platform to some degree. Obviously, they do have their terms of service, which keep changing. So Jim said, in reply to Patton, he said, "I endeavor to be an even more stupid asshole in 2020, so that assholes like you cry more. You suck, your ideas suck, and you are sentenced to forever be a whiny bitch on Twitter. May God have mercy on your soul." Okay, so I guess there was a number of jabs thrown here. Donald Trump was ribbing at Greta Thunberg, the 16-year-old climate activist, and then Patton came in and gave a few barbs of his own at the president, and then of course Jim responded to Patton, who had about 140,000 likes on this tweet when I looked at it. He came in with a little bit more vitriol as well. So the reason I'm telling you this story today and why censorship is involved is that Jim's tweet here was reported, or his account was locked for hateful conduct. Hateful conduct. And he was suspended from Twitter for 7 days. So, like I said, I'm not going to pass judgment on this case, but if you'd like to, please leave me a comment below with your thoughts on this act of censorship by Twitter. Now, normally, I have been suspended before, and I'm sure many of my viewers here, many of you out there, have been suspended before from Twitter, but usually if you're auto-flagged, it's about a 12-hour ban, sometimes 24. Jim here received 7 days, so I'm sure with that time he could maybe come up with the universe or something, if he were actually the God that will have mercy on the soul of Patton Oswalt. But in any event, what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. So without further ado, let's get into some tweets. So the first tweet today is a named tweet. It's called PewDiePie Proxy, and it goes like this. Moral panic is a modern religion. One form of moral panic could be casually described as the false messiah panic, in which people generate alarm over a personality that is too persuasive, too loved, and too successful. The fear of cult mentality holds merit. Yeah, so PewDiePie is a YouTube personality. Shout out to PewDiePie. He has about 100 million subscribers on his YouTube channel and has really brought a lot of light into the world of independent commentary. He mostly focuses on gaming, but he also handles some pop culture and internet culture elements. He's dabbled a little bit here and there into politics, but not too much. But he is a very persuasive personality. And some people believe that there is a cult of personality around PewDiePie, and they may not be wrong, because when you have a large group of 100 million people subscribed and many millions more that might know him casually through social media or through the news or however they might have any access to information on PewDiePie, yes, when somebody has a strong personality and a very large fan base and a large group is involved in any action, in any belief system, you're going to have some good apples, some bad apples, and people in between. And those that take it too seriously and perhaps even allow it to influence their lives in potentially negative ways and, follow this person around. I do call celebrity a modern religion. And I reference people like President Trump and Oprah and Barack Obama, these powerful figures, while PewDiePie is one of the biggest entertainers on the internet. And in that case, of course, there are going to be some people that fall into that modern religion. Even the devoutly secular can put faith over reason and start to follow somebody based on who they are, what their credentials are, and how big or persuasive their personality is. So this fear of cult mentality does hold merit. However, on this channel here, we like to preach individual agency. We don't think about idiocracy mobs and people being hypnotized so much, although we are always being brainwashed. We are always being hypnotized every minute of every day by ourselves and others. So it's something to keep in mind. But my default is to not try to mind read and not try to project what I believe about other people's opinions onto them, and not suggest perhaps what they call the third person effect, that other people, a third party, doesn't know or doesn't have information, assuming ignorance in other people. Yes, many times you'll find that that is the virtuous action, just because so often people do fall into echo chamber thinking, or they're willfully ignorant. We all, succumb to that at one point or another, and we have to make sure that our cognitive dissonance muscles are strong and that we can, engage with ideas that seem contrary but may not be, because contradictions, some say, don't even exist, don't really exist. It's just a lack of knowledge and information that would fill in those gaps in logic and rationality. So, the false messiah panic. Yes, if somebody does have you watching their content every day or every night and you're receiving the same messaging day after day, no matter what your media sources might be, may it be Fox News or it could be CNN or MSNBC. Maybe it's InfoWars, maybe it's the Young Turks, maybe it's Scott Adams or Secular Talk with Kyle Kulinski, or whatever program you're watching, Razor Fist, or my friend Poopy420, or Jeff Tidwell. Any of these figures could be considered too persuasive, and the messaging could be considered destructive on a subjective basis by a number of people who see things through a different lens. And of course, there may be moral issues with certain people, but again, I'm not one to judge. I'm just here to take it all in and try to describe it to the best of my ability with as little bias as possible, which is admittedly pretty hard, as you might imagine. So, one form of moral panic, a modern religion for postmodern prophets. One form of moral panic could be casually described as the false messiah panic, in which people generate alarm over a personality that is too persuasive. So, persuasion really hasn't been measured. They say that once things are measured, they're easier to regulate. Persuasion has not been measured. But what you've seen over time is that some of the more persuasive personalities have been, well, martyrs of the modern religion of censorship over time, because oftentimes their messaging conflicts with the messaging and the ideology of the service providers of these platforms. Sometimes there are contracts in place there. As some would say, some call it, I think this is mold bug, my friend Spread could tell you. The cathedral, the people that are essentially a form of elite, they like to protect their elite status. They don't want new people coming in unless they've been approved, unless they've gotten their blessings from the prophets and the popes of the modern religion, that is, institutions, academia, media, and state. Follow the money, follow the modern religion, and you reach these people that may be sophists, or they may be trying to protect their power in society, their institutional credentials. They might be, I do say seek subject matter experts, but I also believe in what Richard Feynman, the famed physicist, says, that science is the belief in the ignorance of experts. You should go to people that are more acquainted with the material and yet not also put faith over reason. You should try to keep an even-keeled, balanced frame when it comes to these things, and not just fall into believing somebody because they have credentials or because they're famous, as with celebrity, or so on and so forth. So, when someone is too loved, too successful, it can generate some panic, and the fear of cult mentality holds merit. So, you could say that that's a cult. PewDiePie is a cult. And I assure you that PewDiePie himself would probably dissuade you of that notion, because anytime, again, that somebody has a large platform, they're going to attract all different kinds of followers and all different kinds of personalities that may see them in different ways and may interact and promote the material in ways that the original content creator might not have necessarily endorsed. But you say it's a cult. Well, for every positive, there is a negative. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So, if PewDiePie is a cult, is there an anti-PewDiePie cult as well? Think about that and get back to me in the comments section below. So, moving on from this tweet here. So, I have another named tweet here. And it's called Use Your Illusion. We are hypnotized on a daily basis by media, our family, our friends, and at work, for good and bad. We are hypnotizing others. Allowing ourselves to be placed under a persuasion spell is a choice. Avoiding illusory trap doors is easier when you know the craft. So, This is what we were just talking about, being hypnotized every day by media, by yourself, by others. People act in a way, they advocate in a way, they message in a way to get other people to do the things that they want. We all do this. We want to promote good behavior and punish bad behavior. This is called meritocracy. So we are hypnotized on a daily basis by media, our family, our friends, and at work. So some people talk about positive punishment, and there's positive affirmation, negative affirmation, positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. And ideally, I think most of us would like it if life were as stimulating, but also as streamlined as possible for the most part. We'd like things to go in a way that, yeah, we have enough friction so that we're challenged, we're not bored, but at the same time, we would likely prefer, in general, most people would prefer, that bad things don't happen to them. And of course, with the looming threat, the inevitable death at the end of the road, it's just a matter of time before something bad happens. Of course, I'm not sure if by the time I'm an old man, I'll be ready for death. Kind of morbid to think about it that way, but so we're hypnotized to act in a specific way. And in many ways, these forms of hypnosis and persuasion come as ideologies, code, for example. And in some cases, I do call it modern religion, social justice, censorship, institutions, global warming, moral panic, outrage culture, celebrity, and more. People are hypnotized and brought into certain boxes and certain ways of thinking, and outside that box, outside that narrow Overton window of acceptable thought and dialogue is extreme. Of course, it's considered extreme by those that would proselytize you to get in that box in the first place. And of course, they usually pair it with real-world moralism and moral virtue and universal truth, and they might say things like equity and equality and equal, and everybody, we might be saving the world. With a modern religion, of course, you always have to have some sort of evil or doom device. You have to have doomsayers, but you have to have an apocalypse in every religion. So with the modern religion of global warming, of course, that's climate catastrophe. And when I hear about that, because I'm agnostic to most of these modern religions, including global warming, I say, okay, doomer, and leave it at that. But of course, definitely seek subject matter experts and find your truth when it comes to these topics. I am still learning every day. So it's not necessarily good or bad that we're being hypnotized. It's actually just a simple fact. It's a fact. What I'm saying right now is reinforcing my confirmation bias. I'm passing the same information through my neural pathways again and again. And because all of this makes sense to me, there's no cognitive dissonance muscles to bounce things off. If I say the wrong thing, if I say the opposite of the truth, in my estimation, I will, of course, start to bounce it off and try to course correct, as it were, find a new pathway to move forward. So we are hypnotizing others. We are always trying to create the world we want to see, whether we know it or not. A lot of this becomes automatic and subliminal over time. We just use our pattern recognition to find things that we like and that we don't like, things that are generally in the neutral space, and we try to, reward good behavior, punish bad behavior. We try to not repeat mistakes. If we had a negative experience doing something, that kind of informs our expectations when we go into the future and try to do the same thing again. We know what to expect. We know what to avoid. So we are kind of convincing ourselves of what reality is. And sometimes without enough information, you have limited information. Well, I always say the past does not dictate the future. So just because something, looks similar, you can make an analogy if you'd like. 20 years ago this happened, and now because 20 years ago it happened, it'll happen again. Does that make sense? For some things, it is determined. As physics determines certain things. I apply casual fatalism, but in some cases you just know what is inevitable. For example, we know the sun is in the sky, it's going to be there tomorrow. The moon's there, they're going to be there. Unless there's a catastrophe, unless there's a major change, a sea change in our universe, in our galaxy, in our solar system. But these things are constant. And so once we use our pattern recognition, we apply a little casual fatalism, some things can be moved and others appear to not be movable, and we navigate around them. Of course, we are building a program. We are programming ourselves to navigate reality in a specific way. And usually it's to our benefit, because we are survivalistic organisms and we like to be happy for the most part. Unless we have pathology that suggests otherwise on an individual and subjective basis. So I continue here. Allowing ourselves to be placed under a persuasion spell is a choice. So persuasion is a science. I listen to Robert Cialdini and Scott Adams and Mike Cernovich, Ali Alexander, and a few other people on the subject, the art and science of persuasion. Of course, some people might refer to it as, it is a linguistic science. You have things like negotiation and publicity. They're all part of this system. It's kind of an economy of words and of behaviors. So persuasion spell, of course, if someone is very persuasive, if they're negotiating correctly, if they have, good skills at, making arrangements and deals and convincing other people to act or do certain things or to say certain things to influence. The art of influence is about persuasion. These are all under the same header, okay? Now, persuasion, of course, is a form of hypnosis. It's a form of hypnosis, persuasion. So, understanding the mechanisms of persuasion can certainly help people recognize when they are being, when marketing speak is drawing them in, and when people, for example, political pundits, are advocating in a specific direction and framing things. Persuasion is largely about framing things correctly so that, reality is interpreted based on the frame. It gets into your head, goes through your confirmation and becomes how you observe different situations. You look at them in different frames. And I say change the frame, change the game. But it's a choice. It's not deterministic. Persuasion can persuade, or it can, you can reject persuasion, of course. There's no persuasion I can think of that's good enough to always be accepted. But being aware that you're being hypnotized all the time, being aware of how persuasion works, the mechanisms, the science, and the art of how these things work, is probably to our benefit, because with more information we can make better choices and we can choose how we'd like to proceed and not just focus on how we've been, there's different words you can use: brainwashed, hypnotized, persuaded, however you'd like to frame things for yourself. It is a choice. So avoiding illusory trapdoors is easier when you know the craft. So this is basically just a pitch for studying a little bit of persuasion, learning a little bit of economics, marketing, studying linguistics. I recommend this to most people that want to understand their world better. But if you're working in a philosophical realm, a political realm, talking about psychology and these things like that, if you're becoming a pundit online and you want to talk about these things, I would recommend persuasion as a general. In fact, I do believe it should be taught in schools. If you're going to vocational school, especially, but I think even, it would be great if K through 12 had, more economics. Bring back home ec, and have persuasion, have negotiation, so that people can get better at negotiating for raises and negotiating for jobs and building equitable contracts and learning how to stand their ground and know what deals are good and bad, know which ones to reject and which ones to push forward. I think these skills, this building a skill stack that has persuasion in it, is key to success if you want to be very successful in the larger world. If you know what to expect, if you know what to look for, if you know the mechanics of hypnosis and persuasion, you start to see them. You start to recognize the patterns. For example, I'm not a persuasion expert. Seek subject matter experts and leave me a comment below with some that you'd like to recommend to me and to others. Please do. But I study it enough to, I can look at an article that I know was written by a marketing expert, and you can kind of see some of what they did there. Oh, here they're pacing and they're doing a little bit of here. They're making you think past the sale, okay, and they're framing things in such a way that it makes you feel like you're compelled, that you might be at a loss if you don't buy into their product or service or mentality. So you want to use your illusion. You don't want to be taken in. You don't want to be part of the mindless mob that just does things based on emotion. You want to have a reason. You want to be able to rationalize your decision-making process in a way. We don't really have necessarily, I believe, in irrational free will, but there's also rational free will, the way of the universe. And the truth is that we make a lot of decisions emotionally. We make them before we know we've made them. Our brain makes them for us, and then we go ahead with our frontal lobes, or however it is. A brain scientist can certainly help educate me on this. But we go ahead and we rationalize what the lizard and the mammalian brain have decided for us. We already kind of know our decisions ahead of time on a subconscious level. That's why all these things that happen that are subliminal and subconscious, all these little effects, it's important to just study persuasion and get up to speed on some of the things that are trying to manipulate you and I as we get through our daily process. Okay, onward to another tweet. Here we go. So here's something entirely different. You're a terrible driver if you pass on the right. I see it constantly, and it's always a swerving car that's going about 5 to 10 miles per hour too fast for current road conditions. Our lives are worth more than the 1 to 2 minutes you'll gain here and subsequently lose at an overlong red light later. So I won't go into too much detail on this. It's pretty clear. Passing on the right is, in many states, if not all states, not recommended. I don't think it's recommended by the driver's manual, but I see it so often. And I get it. People always make this argument to me. If you're in the passing lane, the left lane, the fast lane, and you're going slow or you're not passing, yeah, people are going to try to pass you on the right because it's their only recourse. So the idea is you don't really want to be in the left lane on the highway unless you're going very, very fast or you're just temporarily passing somebody, of course. But I see passing on the right so often, and it's always dangerous. Like, there's no slow pass. People tend to go, root, root, root. You've seen it. You know what I mean. And they're going too fast. And I say, you can gain, sure, now you're ahead of me. Now you're ahead of me. Congratulations, you're ahead of me. But of course, you've only gained about 1 to 2 minutes on your commute, most likely, and that could be erased instantaneously by a red light. Okay, so if that's, if you're risking lives for 1 to 2 minutes that may be erased, you may want to rethink your position. Just going through some tweets here. People I respect. Kim Iversen. She is a left-leaning YouTube news pundit, political pundit. And she, if you are, especially if you're on the economic populist left, the Bernies, some of the Elizabeth Warren policies, Andrew Yang, Tulsi Gabbard, if you're into that part of the Democrat Party, Kim Iversen does a great job. Shout out to Kim Iversen. I do watch your channel from time to time. We do disagree on a number of issues because, I happen to take different positions on a few things, but in general, she offers a reasonable, see, I could say it correctly there, rational, reasonable outlook and analysis on current events. And so I do want to pitch her. Definitely check her out, especially if you're in a right-wing echo chamber. If you're in a right-wing echo chamber and you need to get some left-wing in there just so you have a more balanced and unbiased perspective and you're getting more information is better, someone like Kim Iversen might be a good choice. And I do recommend her. Onward and upward. So here's a tweet. Here's a couple of tweets that were in response to somebody else talking about the popular vote versus the Electoral College in the United States of America, especially as it relates to the presidential election. So this man, Steve, here was saying that he is all about the popular vote. So I say here, I would like it if Los Angeles and New York City were city-states. The popular vote argument tends to revolve around rural voters being overrepresented. Cities who rely on rural goods and manufacturing would be essentially making decisions for their providers. It is a delicate balance. So, of course, manufacturing, farms, food, much of it comes from the country, and the city-states, the cities are making, if you go with a popular vote, the cities are, population centers, and they're making decisions that impact people that provide for them. So that can be broken down pretty simply into that. And of course, I support the Electoral College in this country. I think it should be enshrined forever. And of course, there are ways that we can improve the process. We can do it on a state-based level and find ways to make sure that the electors are, elected as democratically as possible, that people have as big of a voice as possible, and there isn't any election meddling or any kind of interference or things like gerrymandering that could impact how, the will of the people being represented correctly. So let me go here and continue. There were more tweets with this gentleman. Yeah. So the Democrat argument seems to be lately with the Electoral College, since we can't win by the Constitution, let's change the Constitution. And what they don't realize is that direct democracy is tyranny. It is unmitigated rule by the majority. And normally, if you were following the modern religion of social justice, if you were falling into this collectivist ideology of, say, intersectional feminism, intersectionality, identity politics, cultural and social Marxism, this collectivist world, you would think, of course, that you'd want to stay away from the majority would be the oppressor. They would be oppressing the minorities that are the oppressed, people that have a smaller position, that have a smaller stake in the land and in the situation. So Steve's tweets were deleted, so I can't see what I was responding to here. But it goes on. He was talking about my generation. What you describe, and he was talking about safe space culture, and I say yes. Safe space culture is a byproduct of helicopter parenting, participation trophies, which is admittedly a trope and a cliche, but it holds some merit. Everyone is special, political correctness, and the ever-expanding nanny state, and of course the modern religions like social justice that seek to control people and create order and purpose through authoritarianism. I then say meritocracy aches. So I don't really have much of a reference point for what Steve was saying, but I'll talk a little bit about this. The fact when you say that everyone is special, that means no one is special. If everything's evened out, we kind of exist, we live, as we were talking about earlier about pattern recognition, we live in a world where contrast is what really drives us and makes us more likely to make certain choices. We tend to go for the one that stands out, what stands out to us in the environment. We learn to do this over hundreds of thousands, millions of years of evolution. We know what to look for. We know which foods are safe and which colors are dangerous and different things like that. Again, this is not an exact science. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments section below, but of course, we do have our pattern recognition. And meritocracy is based on some things being better than others. You do a good thing, you get a reward. You do a bad thing, you get a punishment. And without that system, you tend to break into chaos because you tend to break into the real idiocracy, the real reverse meritocracy. Idiocracy is reverse meritocracy. And people are not rewarded for good. They're rewarded for random. And they are punished for random. Or they're not rewarded and punished on a consistent basis, a continuous or basis with continuity. So, safe space culture. Safe space culture is a culture of weakness, meaning that I'm not trying to point the finger at anybody and say, well, you're weak. You're weak. We're trying to be as civil and as nice. We don't want to generate any hatred or animosity on this channel or anywhere else for that matter. We want to foster an environment where everybody can succeed and that the glass is half full. But safe space culture is just, it's how people have been cultured. They're never challenged as children, or if they're over-challenged and they're treated poorly, and they learn that reality is a certain way, it does translate. If they've never been challenged, when challenge appears, they're not ready for it. That's why I say get your your cognitive dissonance muscles nice and tight so that you can accept more incoming information and not just bounce it off without a second thought. If you bounce things off without a second thought, there's a good chance you're in a safe space culture. You've been insulated from any sort of criticism or any sort of dissent. You've been placed into a world where people agree with you and things are always friendly and nice and everyone's nice. And sometimes nice is, in a culture of nice, isn't always the best way forward. There are times when a little tough love is needed, a little kick in the butt to make sure we start to do the right thing and get better. And of course, right and wrong being subjective. Okay, helicopter parenting, when the parents swoop in and save the day every time, of course, you're going to have situations where, eventually the child says, where's the helicopter? Where's the helicopter, mom and dad? Or mom and mom? Or dad and dad? Or just mom or just dad? Whoever it might be. Hey, grandma. Hey, guardian. Whoever it might be. So they'll look around for that helicopter and it won't be there, and they won't know what to do. They won't know what to do. So helicopter parenting can have its downsides. Participation trophies, everyone wins culture. Everyone wins, everyone is special. And that's simply not true. okay? You need to fight to be special sometimes. You need to actually try to work, contribute. I don't believe in viewing people by by immutable characteristics. The groups that they're a part of, the people they associate with, I don't want to look at people by group in a collectivist way. I like to look at them by individuality, their independent view of the world, their character, their merit, their flaws. I like to look at that person and see how, give them credit where credit is due. And when you get into a mindset of participation trophies and everyone is special, it gets you used to this idea that, wait a second, why am I? And of course, a lot of children do eschew. They don't like the participation trophies. These are all general statements. These aren't meant to be about you specifically, but these are general observations. And of course, political correctness. We talk about the code that is PC, the code of things like social justice and censorship. What is acceptable, what words you can use, what associations you can have, who you can talk to, what thoughts you're allowed to have that are in that narrow Overton window. We've talked about that. What's politically correct, and how virtuous is it for us to be politically incorrect versus politically correct. And of course, we have an ever-expanding nanny state. We have a surveillance state. We have a welfare state. We have a state where almost no matter what, you can't fail. People do fail here and there, but there is a nanny state where they say, well, if you don't have a job, you get unemployment. And if you can't get unemployment or you can't get a job, you can get food stamps. Now, I'm not saying these are bad things. I'm saying these are just a part of the nanny state. The state takes care of us. We put money in, of course. We put money in through taxes and other means into things like Social Security and Medicare. We do have a somewhat socialized healthcare system already in some respects. And we do have a slightly, we have social programs, and we have socialism in small doses across the U.S. government. But a nanny state, of course, the state becomes the father. The state becomes the mother. If a woman has 4 children or a couple of children, and the father isn't in the picture, the state takes care of it to some degree. So we do have a situation where, no matter what, there's always that helicopter swooping in to save people. And while there may be many situations where that's a good thing, in the long term, there's no telling if it's good or bad. And it could be very individual. Like, what kind of behaviors are we encouraging? What kind of thoughts are we encouraging? And I don't like to be a moralist. I don't like to focus too hard on exactly how I would like things to be, because my view is very limited. I have bias, I have in-group preference, I have my window on the world, and I'm sharing that with you. And of course, everything I say might be right, or everything I say might be wrong, somewhere in between, but I think it's important for us to exercise our free speech and talk about these things. And of course, the modern religion of social justice, which breaks people up into groups largely by immutable characteristics: sex, gender, sexual orientation, race, and skin tone, things that we're born with that we can't change. Well, they'll break you up into Group A and Group B and say, well, Group A is being oppressed by Group B because of this one characteristic, and thus we must equalize, we must play Robin Hood. And the prophets of the modern religion of social justice come in and say, we are going to make this situation more holy. We are going to find equity and equality for all. Now, I believe in equal opportunity, and I think there are areas where the kind of altruistic racism that these people apply, these prophets and disciples of the modern religion apply, I think there's some cases where people have been historically disadvantaged and deserve a little help. That could be the case. There are people that in the past have experienced real oppression, but again, the problem is when you take events of hundreds of years ago and you frame today in the same exact way. We have come so far in these past few hundred years, and so many people believe They're optimistic. They're positive that they can find equal opportunity. They just know that they have to change their mindset. They have to work on their skill stack. They have to work on whatever they can. Now, of course, they're at a disadvantage if they can't get education. So I say we should make education as affordable and accessible as possible. I believe in vocational schooling. I believe in internet schooling. And I believe in homeschooling. But I also do believe in things like charter schools. And if we do have a public school system, I believe in pre-K. And if we go with K through 12, and of course college, I do believe that those should be accessible and affordable to all. I think that scholarships should be based more on merit than on immutable characteristics. But we have to start young. Make sure you educate your children from a young age. And if they're homeschooled or they're outside of the public school system or outside of the institutional system, they won't be as influenced or hypnotized, brainwashed, or persuaded or proselytized into the modern religion where they separate people up into groups and then try to pretend that we're all just a number. How many victim points are you? How many intersectional points do you have? And that means that goes and points to how much privilege you have. How much privilege do you have? Huh? Of course, mind reading is impossible, and knowing just how advantaged or disadvantaged somebody is, it's all very subjective. You know, you can't just look at somebody. You can maybe, if you talk to a linguist, you can maybe come to a conclusion about, you know, what kind of background they have and how much pain they've suffered and what their challenges are in life. But in general, you can't just look at people by their face value. You can't judge a book by its cover. So I say that meritocracy aches when you start getting into this world where you don't look at merit. You don't look at merit. And of course, you might hear arguments that say, well, meritocracy isn't real, Jeff. Meritocracy is fake because of bias and nepotism. Well, two things. We're all biased, and we all have nepotistic tendencies. We help our friends and family before we help other people that aren't ourselves, our friends, or our family, right? That's bias and nepotism. Now, there is one other really good argument for nepotism. I know it's fun to come up with, you know, good arguments for things that generally are viewed only as negative or positive, and try to open up the door to say that, you know, hey, there's other sides to this story. With nepotism, you're usually hiring somebody that then, of course, owes you a favor. Now, again, people will say, well, that's not very meritocratic. You're going on a system of negotiation and bartering. That's true. That is true. You are doing that. But the fact is that almost everybody does that. Everybody has in-group preference, except maybe white liberals. But moving on. Everyone has in-group preference. Everybody has bias. So there's another thing, too. If you're hiring somebody for a high-level position, do you want to hire an unknown if you can avoid it? Say if you know somebody, a friend, a family member, that you can trust, that you know won't stab you in the back, that you know will do a good job for you, will put the effort in, okay? Wouldn't you want to select that person first? I'm talking just, we can talk irrationally or we can talk rationally, however we'd like to. But you would hire the person that you trust to do the job and that has consequences if they don't do it right. Now, yes, you have situations where someone takes their son, who might be a coke addict, for example, and puts them into a job at a company, say Burisma, where they might not be qualified, and you go, okay, well, that's just nepotism. This person isn't qualified, and this is reverse meritocracy because they don't have merit, and yet they're rewarded with this job and this position that's high paying. Yes, corruption happens. Corruption is real, okay, and it's happened in the Trump family. It's happened in the Biden family. It's happened to millions and millions of people because it's part of our irrational human experience. We don't go by, meritocracy is a beautiful thing, but it's an ideal. It's a system. And again, If you don't adhere to the system, yeah, you're going to have some problems. And the system isn't perfect because no human construct is. Okay, I talk in one of my other videos, my video about politics and epistemology and my advocacy. Check it out on my channel on BitChute and YouTube. And I go and talk about how, perfection is a fallacy until you create a box, say 10 by 10, 100 squares. And if you can click the positive, you can click the vector positive on every one of those 100 squares, yes, you may have achieved perfection, but it's within a limited frame of 100 squares. So, meritocracy, yeah. Meritocracy is an ideal, just like all of our other systems and ideologies and our goals. It's an ideal. But I do believe that, somebody that knows what they're doing and has experience, and if you know them and you know just what the work entails, and you think that, well, my son or my friend or my daughter might be the best fit for this, and the fact is that most people, when faced with this decision, well, I can hire, it's not just one person making these decisions, it's millions. In most cases, if somebody says, well, I can hire my cousin, or I can hire this random person I don't know who's unproven, but my cousin, I know they've done a good job. In that case, nepotism is potentially virtuous. It might be unfair, but life isn't fair. It may be corrupt, but corruption is everywhere. With absolute power, you get corruption. Power breeds corruption. So, I figured I'd just talk a little bit about that today. And we'll do 2 more tweets for you today. Nice to be back, making tweet videos. Of course, I do put up segments that are excerpts from these tweet videos later on. You can find those on my channel. The new videos are called Tweet, and the segments are named specifically what they discuss. So definitely check that out. Here's a tweet that I saw rolling around, and I like this one a lot, and I do want to go I do want to go through this because this is a wonderful named tweet here today. It's called Bumper Stuck. Bumper Stuck. And it's essentially a collection of bumper stickers. And I'll name them off, and then we'll go through them one by one and dissect them. Bumper Stuck. Individual agency is real. Words are not actions. Thoughts are not crimes. Groups are not people. Mind reading is impossible. Inner reality is subjective. We always have a choice. Judge others by character. Free speech defeats hate. Live by love. Okay, so let's go through these bumper stickers and talk briefly about each one of them. So, individual agency is real. On this channel, we focus on individual agency and everybody having their own unique perspective on the world. 7 billion plus people living here, and we all have our own unique perspective, and we all have agency. Humans operate in a realm of what I call irrational free will. That means it's not deterministic. We all have choice. We all have agency. And yes, we are heavily, heavily conditioned by cultural engineering and other things, our parents, our friends, ourselves, our geological location, and so on and so forth. There's so many factors that go into what make us, us, and why we think the way we do, This is where rational free will comes in. Rational free will is the fact that since the Big Bang, there's been so many, countless quadrillion to the 10th power, etc., particle collisions and events, cells moving and shaking at the microscopic level, and so forth. And of course, there is this sort of deterministic element to that things go the way they go, that organisms move in a survivalistic direction. They move forward and they try to survive. And this has informed so much of our reality from the word go, based on current scientific evidence and data. But I say that, of course, individual agency is real. You are not controlled by a cult. You're not controlled by a cult leader. You're not controlled by other people. Your actions are your own. They may be misinformed. They may be irrational. Well, we have this thing called irrational free will. It means that human beings don't always conform to rational free will. They don't conform to the behaviors deeply coded into their DNA over millions and billions of years. We do things that, well, we make our best effort, or we do things that are the opposite of what we believe to be the right way to go. And sometimes we do those things that are opposite on purpose, just to say that we have that free will, and that happens to be part of our free will, our coded rational free will, the behaviors that we are, coded to have. You expect somebody that likes to say the opposite or says irreverent things, you can almost predict that they will say irreverent or irrational things at a point. So even the irrational can be somewhat predictable. You can have a predictive filter on that. That said, I don't preach that on this channel. I preach irrational free will, and I say that, it's up to you what you do. You can't, if you get a signal or a message from somebody else saying, do this, do this, do this, they're not controlling you. You're controlling you. That's really what it breaks down to. Individual agency is real, and we must remember that. Can't blame others for our actions. We must remain accountable and responsible. That leads into the second bumper sticker, words are not actions. Now, I am largely a free speech absolutist. There are some areas where I don't advocate full free speech, things like credible threats, direct harm, doxing, slander, libel, defamation, unconsented pornography. There are some areas where cases where direct harm is being inflicted, things like inciting violence. I don't think that should be part of free speech. It's too destructive. But words are not actions. So if you look at a couple of children on a bus, and one child sitting down talking to the other children, and then the other children start punching them, that punch is an action. It's a violent, irrational action. They're punching the other child. His words don't do anything. They can bounce right off of you if you'd like. You can ignore them. They don't physically affect you in any meaningful way. So words are not actions. Words can lead to action. Words can influence action. But words by themselves are just words. And if you live pathos first, you don't have a logos first perspective on philosophy, you live focusing on emotions, words can easily incite people to do things that they shouldn't do. But I say, of course, words are not actions. At the end of the day, no matter what you can say, words are words. And only if there is a specific action associated with them, a specific thing that's going to happen if you say that word. If you're Captain Picard on the Starship Enterprise and you say, make it so, engage, you're, whatever happens, happens. But of course, people have individual agency, and if the captain says, I want you to kill all of us right now, send us into that nearest star cluster, warp speed, warp 9, make it so, engage. Well, you have individual agency, Mr. Data. Well, maybe not Mr. Data, because you're an android. But hey, Commander Riker or Counselor Troy, you have individual agency. You can say, well, Captain, get screwed. Okay? We're not going to just follow you blindly into the night. Words are not actions. Next one is thoughts are not crimes. Thoughts are not crimes. And of course, people get into this mindset that if somebody says something or if somebody expresses an opinion, it's intolerant or it's offensive or it shouldn't be allowed or it should be censored, it should be removed from the public square. It's not viable, it's not acceptable dialogue, it's not in that window. And so we should remove it. We should make that choice. Now, of course, when I talk about free speech, I like to say the fact that I am defining free speech for you should be a red flag, because anybody that defines free speech is authoritarian by nature. You don't listen to my views on free speech. I just tell you what my perception is of it. Okay, I'm defining it for myself and in general for you, and you should take that with a grain of salt. But thoughts are not crimes. So we have a number of people out there that are being suppressed and silenced and demonized by the press and by other people, by society, for having the wrong thoughts. And wrong, of course, being subjective. A lot of these thoughts, if they don't hold any scientific or factual merit, if you can't look at it and gather empirical evidence, if you can't reason with it or rationalize it in any way, of course, the thought might not have much merit, but of course this is up for the public opinion, the court of public opinion, to decide. And of course, things like public consensus. Now, of course, we shouldn't just go by public consensus. Just because 80% of people say something doesn't mean it's right or wrong or anything. But thoughts are not crimes. We shouldn't be trying to get into the business of you can't think this way or it's a crime or you're a bad person or you're a pariah now. That just breeds hate, and we don't want to breed hate. And part of this is the next one here. Groups are not people. Groups are not people. So if you're in a collectivist mindset versus an individual mindset, if you're in this collectivist thing versus this individual thing, you might go, well, you are the labels that we ascribe to you. If I put an adjective or a descriptor before your name, well, that's what you are. You're in that group now. I've assigned an association to you. And then you have your immutable characteristics. Oh, you're white, you're black, you're Asian, you're Native American, you're anything. You're Hispanic, you're any immutable characteristic like race or skin tone. Oh, you're male, you're female, you're in that group. Okay. You have a gender, you have a sexual orientation, you have a religion. Some of these are mutable and some of these are immutable. Okay. You have a job, you have hobbies, you have an ideology, you have all these different things. And the fact is that groups are not people. Groups are organizations of people by certain labels, by certain qualifiers. People themselves are far too complex to put into a singular box or a number of boxes. Now, of course, we can all in many ways be broken down into certain labels, but that is a filter on reality. That's a window into reality, not the truth, the hard truth. It's one perception, one version of what reality is. Me personally, I don't like to default to viewing people on by their immutable characteristics. I don't like to say, oh, this white woman, this black man. I try to stay away from that unless it's necessary. Okay? When we start using that, of course, to incite division, to create division between people and put them against each other and say, well, hey men, women bad, you're going to create misogynists. And then when you have, hey women, men bad, well, that's third wave and largely fourth wave feminism that states that men are the oppressor and women are the oppressed. People get conditioned with that messaging again and again and again by saying, well, the group. And they start missing the forest for the trees. And there are 7 billion trees. There are so many people out there with their own perspective, their own actions, their own merits and flaws, that their own character that need to be assessed. They're individuals. They're not just the groups they associate with. They're not the people they talk to. They have a individual lens. And that's what I'm saying when I say groups are not people. Next up is mind reading is impossible, but you wouldn't know it if you've been on Twitter or other social media outlets lately, because people tend to try to mind read. They try to project their thoughts onto you, and they say, well, what you're saying is this, and they put out their thought of what they think you're saying. Now again, it's okay to put something out and say, well, are you saying this? And then you have a chance to clarify. But people don't take that step of, well, are you? Or they don't ask you to clarify. They basically state your position for you, and then it's up to you if you decide, do you want to clarify now that they've already put out their bias, their confirmation about what you're saying? Are they too far from you position-wise for you to bring them in and get them closer? And it becomes a time sink if people are presenting the wrong opinion that you don't have. You know, it's all about how you approach debate. I don't like to police debate or police speech. I like to give tips, of course, to help people have a nicer time. But mind reading is impossible, and people, of course, will ascribe to you all the reasons you're doing something. Well, you're doing something because you're immutable characteristic A, or you're immutable characteristic B, or maybe you have this job, or maybe you've been born here, or maybe you have this, or maybe you have that. This is why you're doing it. That's all attempted mind reading. It's just attempted mind reading. When they say you're doing this because this. Well, no, you don't know the reason why I'm doing this. I know the reason why I'm doing this, and I know the reasons that I have communicated that I'm doing this, but you really don't know unless you're in my head or I'm in yours, whoever it might be that you're trying to mind read. Unless you have Neuralink, you can't read minds. Elon Musk, get on that. I think the Twitter audience you have will quite enjoy it. So you can't get in somebody's head. You can only go by what it seems like they are suggesting. And I say more information is better, so definitely ask questions, clarify, and of course, if someone says something out of line, Scott Adams recommends the 48-hour rule to allow them time to apologize if apology is warranted. But mind reading is impossible. You can't mind read somebody to determine why their actions took place. And what people do is they go back to groups being people, and they look at the labels that they know you have, and they say, well, based on labels 1, 2, and 3, I think the reason you did this was this, and it's going to be really hard to convince me otherwise. Mind reading is impossible, folks. Never forget. The next one is inner reality is subjective. So, of course, I talk a little bit about inner and outer reality. There is the reality in our heads. Check out my new video on BitChute and YouTube, The Reality in Our Heads. And I talk a little bit about how we have our inner reality, and we also have the observable reality that's out there. It's out there in the world. What other people see, what the other 7+ billion people see and observe. But then we also have what we see through our two eyes, our window on the world. And of course, just like in a church, sometimes you have some colored glass. That's a lens. That's a filter you put over your inner reality as you look out. And you see what you see. You have a subjective view of what reality, the larger, the higher reality, outer reality is. And of course, we always have to keep that in mind. What are our biases? Where are my blind spots? I have many. You have many. We all have many blind spots. What are those? And why are we having so much trouble getting over certain things that other people seem to accept so openly and graciously? So it is subjective. We have our view, and to us, it might be right or it might be wrong, but to others, it could be totally different. They might have their own, they do have their own subjective view of what's going on because they're one person. They're an observer, and they, you're a participant, you're an observer, But you participate from your perspective, you participate from your eyes, from your brain. You have this this world is being, it's created. It's an outer world. There's an objective, or as close as we can imagine, to objective world out there for us to observe and to enjoy and to participate in. But our window on that more objective world, the outer reality, is a subjective filter that's based on our own, biochemistry and so forth. So it is subjective. And we should always remember that. That way we don't get into this whole, right think and wrong think, because two people can look at one situation and see something different. All two people look at the same situation and see something slightly different. So with that in mind, inner reality is subjective. We always have a choice. So I like to talk a lot about negative liberty, positive liberty, and general libertarian beliefs on this channel. Of course, talking about individual agency and liberty, individualism, and being able to craft your own way. I say on my Twitter, create your own label, create your own brand, because you have a choice. You have a choice of how you're perceived. To some degree, people are going to judge you as they judge you. That's up to them. But how you present yourself and who you are, you have a choice. You always have a choice in terms of your actions. Now, I'm not saying that you have unlimited free will. We have limits. I can't just travel from here to Mars in a nanosecond. That can't happen. I can't just get a job at a very wealthy, for example, law firm, or whatever it might be. I can't get a six-figure salary like that. I have to work hard for it, and I have to know the right people. I have to get a little lucky to go with the merit and the character that I have. That might be good, my credentials and so forth. But we always have a choice. It's a good default. You have a choice. And if you put yourself in a situation where you don't have any choice, well, you're at a disadvantage. You want to be able to create a situation where you always have an out. You don't want to be boxed into one determined possibility. You want to be able to move around and say, well, if this isn't going well, then I'll try track 2. And if track 2 isn't going well, I'll go to track 3. And if track 3 isn't helping me out, I'll go back to track 1. And maybe now track 1 is working again. But there are, so many tracks. There are so many options in life. There are so many things we can do. We don't want to be boxed into, well, I'm stuck and I'll always be stuck. You can always change your reality by making different choices. And instead of going with the tide, you might want to go against it for a bit. Or instead of going against the tide, you might want to go with the tide. And I could make a billion analogies for this. I have all the choices in the world, and so do you. You have all the choice in the world. You always have a choice. And, you're not a slave to reality. There are only so many places you can go. This life, it's life and death. It's a bit of a zero-sum game. We all have nothing in the end except for our legacy and our family to pass on our genes. But you always do have a choice. And some of those choices are very difficult. They're very hard. But they exist nonetheless. The next bumper sticker is judge others by character. Judge others by character. So don't look at their labels. Don't look at, what the color of their skin might be, what their gender is, what they do for work, who they support, who they talk to, what they do. If they support some really bad people, may it be in politics or entertainment, if they condone bad behavior, that's a negative character trait for the most part. But you want to judge by character. You want to look at the pros and the cons of how a person's interacted with the world, their words and actions. You don't want to look at them by anything they can't change. You want to look at things that they've chosen to do, that they have some agency over, they can choose to do. Their merits and their flaws, their character, not their immutables, and certainly not just the people that they talk to and associate with. Because, frankly, Scott Adams has talked about this a little bit, about association, freedom of association. We have it in this country, and we should keep it. But there's this assumption that if you talk to somebody that's less than savory, how do you think, with individual agency and us all mind reading being impossible, if you encounter somebody that is a bad hombre, a bad person, by any objective standard, and you happen to talk to them and just want to communicate with them as a human being, well, does it make you a bad person for trying to learn more about this bad person? Like, if you're just talking to them and treating them like a human being, you're not condoning their actions. You're not saying they were right to do whatever they've done that might be, objectively, subjectively wrong, right? But you're just talking to them. But some people say, well, you're condoning them. You're platforming hate. You're platforming somebody that doesn't deserve to have a voice. And I say, well, we could treat them like a total pariah. But then they'll just find other total pariahs that accept them. They'll gang up, and with all the confirmation bias of their echo chamber, who knows what they might do? They might start to be influenced to continue their bad behavior because all their friends are doing it. There's so many different things that could happen. They are not determined, but they're possible, and they become more likely the more factors you add. But you want to judge others by their character. You want to go by meritocracy as an ideal. You reward good behavior and you punish bad behavior. And if you like something, you give it kudos. And if you don't like something, well, you give it criticism. And you try to, if you're optimistic and positive, you try to help it improve or give positive feedback. So on that subject of putting people down and making them into pariahs, I say here, the next bumper sticker, number 9, free speech defeats hate. Free speech defeats hate. Now, there's this thing out there in the world called hate speech. Hate speech. It's a completely arbitrary term, very subjective. It's a construct. It's not any specific, there's no specific definition for it. It's whatever somebody wants to ascribe. It's a label for people to ascribe to things they don't like. May they be ideology or anything else. If they feel that criticism is undue, they might call it hate instead of love, as opposed to love. That's a very basic simplification of reality. If it's not love, it's hate. If it's not hate, it's love. But we do get into that absolutist thinking quite often. And especially in persuasion, you do want to simplify things. So it may appear that way on the surface when you're talking to somebody that understands persuasion and understands the idea of simplifying things. Yes, there may be these juxtapositions set up that might be a little bit too reductive. But free speech defeats hate because more speech, through free speech you get more speech. More speech defeats hate speech. You want to be able to talk to people that might be, of course, spewing hateful dialogue, in your estimation, and ask them and clarify with them what they mean, what they're saying. And if you'd like, you can proselytize to them. You can persuade them and say, listen, I don't think you're on the right path here, and here's why. You can give them a reasoned explanation as to why their hateful dialogue is destructive. Maybe they know it's destructive. Maybe they are an irrational force that just wants to burn it all down. But you do want to allow for free speech, for these things to be said so that they can be publicly ridiculed. Okay? If something is wrong, you don't want it just relegated to a very condensed, very calculated and full of the same idea echo chamber saying that one thing that you don't like. You want it to be out there for people to be able to point to and say, excuse me, sir or madam, what you're saying is illogical, it is irrational, and it is filled with hate, and I think you should stop. You talk to people like that, at first, at least. Now, of course, if you're talking about the publisher versus platform debate on social media, the publisher should be able to make the site accessible and safe and fun for families and for all these people. They don't want to be seeing things that are deliberately offensive. And of course, that is, to some degree, their, if you have a household, if you're a person, you can mute, you can block, you can, if you have a forum, you can kick people out, you can moderate. But we do talk about free speech as it occurs on social media. And social media I do consider to be the modern public square. I don't consider it a household. I consider it a place like Twitter, where millions, hundreds of millions of people use it. Facebook. I consider these places to be the modern public square because you have all these people. And this is the place, this is the city, this is the town of dialogue. I call it Twitter town. You have, it's not physical place, it's a digital place where people can come and congregate. And it's like the city. Like if somebody's on the sidewalk in a city and they say, well, fuck you. They have free speech, right? And even in 1946 or 1947, the Supreme Court ruled that a small privately owned company town had to abide by the First Amendment. So I say we need an Internet Bill of Rights so that U.S. firms especially, and all the dialogue contained on their site should be under the same rules of the First Amendment. And people will say, of course, well, the First Amendment protects freedom of speech is about government controlling speech. It's about government. And I say, well, if you have post-governmental entities like Facebook and Twitter, where they're housing like 80% of the dialogue, and they're just arbitrarily, they have protections against liability, so they're treated like they're a public. They're treated like a platform, but they have the curation abilities of a publisher. So I say you need to pick one, publisher or platform. I say they should be platform. They say they should be publisher because that gives them full, control as authors. But I do say, of course, that free speech defeats hate. Most of the people that are disciples of the modern religion of censorship will say, of course, we want censorship because it gets rid of hate. And I say, no, it just concentrates it. Ask Noam Chomsky. He has the same position on that. So definitely apply free speech if you want to whittle away at all those other unsavory things going on. And finally, live by love. Think positive. It's like Norman Vincent Peale says, the power of positive thinking. Live by love. Don't live by hate. Live by positive, not negative. Because in this world, we're going to die someday. We're not going to be here forever. And if we look inward and we don't look outward, we don't look to expand, but we look to contract, we are going to eventually, I don't think it's a very good mindset. I think that people should try to love as much as possible. Self-hatred, guilt, all these things, there's utility for them, and they're going to happen. They're going to happen. I'm not trying to police, hey, God and up above, whoever it might be. I am agnostic. I'm not trying to police human behavior. I'm not trying to police, what nature entails, the survivalistic tendencies of mammals and other species across this wonderful earth and across the universe at large. But I say we live by love. Look on the bright side. Keep the glass half full, not half empty. And try to accept people, accept differences, because diversity is a strength. But it starts with accepting our differences and seeing the pros and cons, the costs and benefits of both sides or all sides of a situation, not just focusing on hating on this. We have irrational hatred in our hearts. We have to direct it somewhere, but I say don't direct it at other people if you can avoid it. And do not direct it at your fellow countrymen. Like if you're going to direct it at anybody, direct it at people that have actually wronged your country. Try to find a big enough banner that enough people can get under, and then learn to love, learn to accept the differences of the people under that banner. One banner that I love, the United States of America. I love it. Love being a patriot. So some bumper stickers for you under my tweet Bumper Stuck. Check it out on Twitter. Okay, we'll do one more tweet for you today. Just a short one, because that one was a little bit long. Moral panic feels good. Oh, it's happening all the time. And with moralism and morality running in cycles in many ways, it's just hilarious to think of what is considered immoral or harmful now that wasn't that way about 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Crazy. Okay. Here's another named tweet for you today. And this one here, I'm not sure if people knew what to make of it, but that's why we make these tweet videos, so we can break down and analyze and deconstruct, sometimes in a postmodern manner, what is going on in Jeff Tidwell's tweets. At Real Jeff Tidwell on Twitter. So this is called Illegal Scholar. Illegal Scholar. Legal purchase. Illegal purchase. Legal distribution. Illegal distribution. Legal construction. Illegal construction. Legal immigration. Illegal immigration. Legal parking. Illegal parking. Legal gambling. Illegal gambling. And legal substances. Illegal substances. So, some may call this authoritarian. I call this positive authoritarianism. But we do live in a country of laws. Some things are legal, some things are illegal. I advocate legal purchases of things because I understand we do have regulation. Some of those regulations, of course, they're all arbitrary, and some of them may be more rational than others. So, of course, I do accept that we need to change certain things over time. Illegal purchases, well, I can't really advocate illegal purchases on here, can I? Because if I did, maybe the government, the police might say, well, what illegal purchases have you made? Well, I haven't made any. To my knowledge, I have purchased things legally. But there is a difference between legal and illegal. Legal distribution of things is oftentimes, there's usually safety involved. There's usually some kind of regulation that makes it so that the public at large is more secure. Illegal distribution, well, oftentimes comes with crime. It is literally crime, but it also comes with violence because you're dealing on a black market. You're dealing on an unregulated market. And the people that do that are not going to be above board. You can't just walk into their office. You can't just go into the mall and walk into a kiosk. That would be legal distribution. Illegal distribution is it's illicit. It's not above board. Legal construction, illegal construction. Of course, we have so many, actually we probably have too many coding regulations when you're trying to build. It just takes forever. I recently had my house worked on, and just getting things up to code and making sure we can dig here and build here, it can be a bit of a challenge, but there's obvious reasons for that because we want to make sure that we have our liberty, our negative liberty, but we don't want to hurt others' positive liberty. We don't want to destroy others' property and destroy things like public sewer access and electrical lines and other things that affect other people. Like, we want to be responsible and accountable. So we would focus on legal construction and not build things where we could destroy hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars of property by doing something wrong, doing it illegally. So far, legal's winning. Legal immigration and illegal immigration. So here's the deal about immigration. I support legal immigration. I want people to come here of all backgrounds, all ethnicities, all races, sexes, genders, sexual orientation. May they be male, female, trans, gay, straight, lesbian, LGBTQ plus, AI, asexual, so on and so forth. I don't even think about those things when I'm trying to choose who should come here. I don't worry about which countries you're coming from, but I do see how, for example, the U.S. government might say, well, 7 countries where we know that terrorists have been coming from, we should limit their immigration. So them coming here would be illegal by default. And I do believe that to have a welfare state, you need to have a successful welfare state, you need to have a strong border. Okay? And yes, people can come here and they can take jobs and they can take things from people that were here already. It's just the way it works. If I have 10 million people and I inject another 20 million over time, they become the majority. And it depends on where they're coming from, what their ideology is, what their belief system is. Ideally, when I have legal immigration, I also think that, just by applying for immigration status, applying to be on the pathway towards citizenship, doing it legally alone shows that you value my country's values, our laws, our way of life. We are a law-abiding country. If you want to be a law-abiding citizen and be one of my fellow citizens, come on in. But if you're just going to come here illegally and break all these laws on your way in, I'm sorry. We can't reward bad behavior. I'm very sorry about that. And I understand people are in desperate circumstances and it's a humanitarian crisis at times. But we have to have a border. We have to have sovereignty. We have laws. We have a welfare state. We can't just take on people endlessly because eventually the ship will tip. The ship will tip. It'll reach, as Greta Thunberg might say, its tipping point. And it might be then too late. So I do not support illegal immigration. I support making the pathway towards citizenship more accessible and bringing in people based on, dun dun dun, you know what I'm going to say, merit. Not just bringing them in because they happen to be economic migrants that need to move out or so on and so forth. Okay. Legal parking and illegal parking. Well, here, no, I still side with legal parking. You don't want to have people parked in places where, how many times have you been on the road and somebody's been parked on a main road, not in a spot, not in a parking spot, but they've been parked like in the lane. And you go, why are you here? It says no parking. It says no parking because you're putting me in danger. You're putting other people in danger. We have legal parking and illegal parking for a reason. It's about safety. A lot of these things are just about keeping things orderly and safe. And I think that's virtuous. Of course, legal gambling and illegal gambling. So, regulation is a two-edged sword. Sometimes it is for really, good purposes. It can help people. It can be altruistic or positive. And other times it is just to prevent certain industries from taking too big of a slice of the pie from other parts of the industry or other industries. Like it's all it is nepotistic or it is corrupt in its design. And legal and illegal gambling, I honestly don't know how you define these. If you know anything about legal or illegal gambling, please do leave me a comment below. But I'd say, you'd want to go by the system that understands, like the taxes that you're going to be paying. Like you want to go by a system where you're not going to be in trouble with the law later on. So you want to use legal gambling. You don't want to get in trouble. Of course, that goes for all of these things. Under a illegal scholar, you don't want to get in trouble. In illegal gambling, anything you do that's illegal is going to be among those that are less savory, usually. The people that are mavericks, that are on the black market, they don't have regulation. They don't have any sort of control to stop them. So you're at their mercy. They are the authority in the situation, and that way, so you're at their beck and call. You can't go to court if you've been illegal gambling and you want to sue somebody, or if you're in any illegal situation and you want to sue somebody to get damages, liability back, whatever it might be. You can't do that because you've done it all illegally. You're bound by contract with the person, and if one person goes down, you're all going down for the most part. So it's kind of a dicey prospect to begin with. But this is the one. Okay, here's the one where I might finally drift a bit more into the illegal advocacy. Legal substances and illegal substances. So as you may know, marijuana, cannabis, pot, weed is on Schedule 1 drug scheduling in the United States. Now, in one of my previous videos, I did say that I believe that marijuana is effectively legal because the Trump administration has said it's a states' rights issue. And so I believe that, essentially it's up to the states. The federal government is not. There may be some cases, there are some cases, most likely, where the federal government is prosecuting people, putting people in prison, which they shouldn't, for nonviolent drug offenses. I don't support that. I think all nonviolent drug offenders should be released. As a general statement. I mean, I'm sure that there are some cases where you might, if somebody is in jail, for example, opioids or something where they know that they're killing people, they know that they're hurting people, you may want to change things around a little bit. But again, it's all morally relative. But I think there are so many substances in this country and in this world that are illegal for some reason that is really not substantive, doesn't really reflect reality. Marijuana is not harmful. Just like with water or any other substance, too much of it can cause negative consequences and side effects. But, there are some things that are legal and illegal because they're illegal because they harm and they produce more harm than good. And I support that. I think that the intentions are good and it's directionally accurate to what people want from a society. They want to trade a little of their freedom for security and get that. But in general, I think that this is one of those areas where, you should be, and I believe in the libertarian value, you should be allowed to ingest what you want. And if you say something's illegal, if you want to ingest something illegal, that's by default putting this a law filter over it and saying, well, you're not allowed, it's illegal, so you're not allowed to ingest that thing. You're not allowed to possess it. To ingest it, you must possess it, and you're not allowed to possess it because it's illegal. I think that it's a fine line to walk, but we should focus on making all drugs legal. We should end the war on drugs and make it a healthcare issue, not a crime. So that's all for today's video. I really do appreciate you watching. Thank you for making it this far. We're about 100 minutes into the video, and I've had a great time. So if you enjoyed the content today, please do like and subscribe. If you didn't enjoy it, well, meritocracy rules, so give me a downvote. It helps with the algorithm. As always, I can be found on Twitter at RealJeffTidwell. I'm also on Gab, Minds, Telegram, Parler, and Instagram. If you're not watching this video on BitChute, you're watching it on YouTube. And as I always say, everything I said in this video today might be wrong. Or everything I said today might be right. Or maybe, perhaps, some of it was right and some of it was wrong. The truth lies between. I think that makes more sense. So once again, I hope you enjoy your day. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.